Hello software warriors, that's Medhat Sabry welcoming you again to Techstamina. This video is about folkloric habit number 1 in a series of videos actually which I started one video ago talking about folkloric habits that detract our progress in software development. So this video is going to be dedicated to the habit number 1. Before going through our discussion for today, let me just remind you with what we said in the last talk. In the last talk we depicted our timeline and our progress in the software development industry since the 80s. I will pick up 3 important milestones here. That is the 80 TCP IP, when everything started to be in the internet working era, leading to our internet revolution we are living right now. Secondly, the commencement or the advent of the agile software movement by the beginnings of 2000, maybe 1999, 2000, something like that. This is a second very important milestone. Why? Because it relates to our video of today. Then we had the 2K10 and above, where a lot of things start to cause turbulence in the business here. So there was a change in the pace and in the mood of this business that led to 2 things. Number 1 was the pace. The pace was changing, the pace was going hectic actually up till this era. And secondly was the change that is hitting this industry more than ever before. That's what we said, and we define folklore as good folklore is things that come from the past and we still use. But bad folklore, and we have to think about bad folklore twice and see replacements and see substitutes if that folklore is dragging us and is not in sync with what's going on in the industry in this era of turbulence and change we are witnessing right now. So let's come to the habit number 1. Coming to our today's discussion about habit number 1. What is that habit? I left it empty actually because I want you to guess. Yes, please? Well, I think we all agree. It's right. Predictiveness. I think I let you down. Most of you did not expect that. It's a kind of a dribbling tactic that I use just to draw your attention a little bit to what's coming. Predictiveness is a synonym actually to serial development. And serial development is again another face, another name for traditional development. And all that are at the end another face of our beloved waterfall. So it's waterfall. Today's talk is about waterfall. Let me just summarize what I intend to put as an agenda. First of all, we must start from the right point. Are we correct that waterfall is not so good for today's software development process? Yes or no? We have to debate about that and come to a conclusion. Then, if so, we have to see why are we sticking to it. In most of the cases, in many cases still, I don't want to change that. In many cases, in some cases I may say, I don't have statistics, but I have seen it still there. Why is it still in place? Thirdly, we have to see what's the bad thing about that. Why is it a detractor, if we agree that it is? Finally, we have to discuss where it fits and where it works well, because it's still there and we are still in need of it. And finally, we come to a very quick briefing of what to do if not to waterfall. Let's start by debating about whether or not it is a detractor. So, to judge whether this is a detractor to the business, to our business, yes or no, I will take you to some evidence. And let me rely here on two industry well-known reports. First is the Standish Group Chaos report, and another report published by Dr. Dobb's journal, and why did I choose the two, actually? I have chosen the two because they are debating. So when they are debating and they agree on one thing, rest assured that the intersection is true. The case report has been there since maybe 1995, and it's been pointing out what is called the software crisis all the time, because of the rate of success of our projects is considered very low in spite of the certifications that we get and all that jazz. So the software crisis is a claim of these people from the Standish Group. Dr. Dobb in 2013 came up with a study done by the industry watcher and analyst Scott Ambler, from Ambisoft. He conducted that research, or he actually managed that research for the Dr. Journal in 2013. There is a debate about the rate of success here and there. I'm not going to go through numbers and figures because I don't want to be a boring exhibition of figures and graphs and infographics and things like that. I will just take the conclusions. They call this the software crisis. These people don't agree, but they agree on one thing. Something is not so good is happening in that industry, and it requires some kind of intervention by some reform, some kind of change in the industry, in the process, in the methods, and all in the thinking, in the mentality, and all that. And that, as I said, started back in 2000 with the Agile movement. So, if this is a crisis, this is not a crisis, but at least a critical situation. So this is, in spite of the fact that it looked like a contradiction, but I see it actually as something much more lending itself to agreement, because there is something that has to be done. It's the magnitude, the different magnitude of the impact of the word, at least, software crisis, and here it's a critical situation, just a critical situation that can be reformed. So, this is one point of agreement, in my point of view. What's the second thing? The second thing is that traditional development, as they call it, which is at the end waterfall, is responsible or has the least success rate in the projects done over the time of the study. And there's no debate about that. Maybe the figures here are shocking and the figures here are acceptable, and in spite of, they have the studies actually go through the paradigms or the SDLCs. SDLCs, of course, stands for the system development life cycle methodology that you adopt. That's the paradigms. And the least that has, or the least success rate is actually with waterfall. So there is no doubt that waterfall is a detracting factor. Let's discuss why are we still sticking to that. waterfall. So, why are we still sticking to waterfall in spite of this fact? By the way, let me just tell you something, that the numbers or the figures for the rate of success are here, you can call them shocking. Here they are a little bit more reasonable. But generally, why are we still sticking to that methodology? Number one reason is it's a kind of cultural inertia, as we call it. Cultural inertia. It actually started in the past when the industry had much cooler and calmer pace. In its time, actually, it started here and started with the big projects for building missiles, for space projects with NASA, where everything was predictable and the projects were large enough to adapt for that, adapt that kind of thinking. So it's a kind of cultural inertia. We all have learned that, and we are doing it, you can say, by instinct so far. One more thing that makes us stick to it, because it's logic. Why? Because it puts things in order. You start by taking requirements from your customer and then putting that in some kind of a report, SRS. You take some kind of, again, of sort of confirmation from your customer that is what he really requires. Then you go and make a design, and then you present that design in an F function specification document, an FSD, and you take a signing off again on that from your customer. You go and code that, implement that, test it, and then deploy, and then get a user acceptance through a user acceptance test. Everything is logic. Plus, not only logic, doing things serially is easier to the human mind. Things that are logically ordered, when you do them in series, that is the least. Of course, there is some kind of parallelism that you do in the activities inside the project, but the phases in the methodology itself are logically ordered in series. So it has some kind of logic and ease of understanding to the project manager and the team. No much maneuvering in that. Thirdly, and this is a hidden cause actually, it gives you some kind of peace of mind. Peace of mind. Mind you of something, before I tell you what is that, what I'm discussing with you is not only the outcome of the readings and the research. It's something assisted by reading and research, but these are findings that I have been seeing for quite long in this industry, and I think many others have seen the same thing and have discussed the same phenomena. So this is evident. It's not only something theoretical or a subject of research. It's true from the market and from the practice. What is that peace of mind? That is some kind of feeling you have the least engagement with your customer, by the way, in this methodology. You don't see him very frequently. You see him at milestones, and then you call him to see what you have done for him. At the end, maybe you use presentations, maybe you are using prototyping at some certain milestones, but the engagement is less, and what you do as a project manager is that you are spending nice time in your office with your team, and then producing most of the time reports and papers. And you take that to your customer with presentations and prototypes, and you ask him to sign it off for you. So you are away, but you pay for that, because it's a kind, in my opinion, of a technical debt. Because at the end, this has a side effect, and we will see that, because all the goodies of that, you can call that, what are the goodies? These are the goodies. The good things about it. The good things. And the bad things are nothing but maybe the other face of the good things. So let me talk to you about what's bad about that. what are the downsides of this kind of methodology. So, with the downside, let's start a new page. Not just because there are too many, but maybe we need some more space. So these are the bad things about it. Number one, and as I told you, I witnessed that myself many, many times, was part of it even, it creates a very good soil for mediocrity, which we are fighting here in Techstamina, and you should be too. So, first thing, it's very prone to give that sense of office work, which is at the end reducing the engagement with the customer and reducing the pace and reducing the morale, reducing the rate at which you are speeding up to your targets, and at the end it's a very good soil for mediocrity. Secondly, it has a long time to delivery. Delivery of what? We are delivering paper most of the time, because in the span of the project and the lifetime of the project, when you do the requirements and analysis, then you present your SRS, then you present your FSD, function specifications document, you do the presentation. The customer does not start to see anything except after months. You are delivering paper all of the time. Imagine that situation. I'm calling you, Mr. John, for instance, and I'm Medhat Sabry telling you, I'm Medhat Sabry from Techstamina, telling you that we have come to a very good milestone earlier 1 week, and I hope that will satisfy you. You will ask me the first question, sorry sir, who is Medhat Sabry? Because maybe you haven't seen me for 3 months, 2 months, a month, something like that. If you are an important stakeholder, even an executive supporter or sponsor of the project, in the midst of the wake of your engagements in other things, of course, in your oral affairs, you may have just dropped the whole thing from your mind, and then I'm calling you to tell you that I finished the report. This is quite actually demoralizing in my point of view. So, it has a long time to deliver functionality or value, a long time to deliver value, which is at the end functionality. So the customer doesn't see anything of value except after a long time, and that has side effects. Morale goes down for everyone, for the customer and maybe for the team. Because the team gets more motivated when it feels that what they're doing in the labs and the offices is actually satisfying someone on the other side, on the stakeholder side. And that is a very demotivating situation for them to stay for a long time, not seeing something of their work causing any effect on the other side of the frontier. So that morale starts to go down. And another thing, it reduces the customer engagement, as I said. And by the way, this is the cornerstone, this is the center, the focus of the thing. It reduces the customer or the stakeholder involvement. Why? You don't see him quite often. Only in stats reports talking about figures and papers. No real functionality except after a long time. So it reduces stakeholder involvement, and by the way, let me stress that this is one of the very important success or failure factors in all the studies that have been made on the success rate of IT projects. The stakeholder involvement and the executive support and sponsorship is very important. And when you reduce that, you are prone to failure more than in any case that you get them involved in. And because of that long time to deliver the value, you get the morale down and you get the involvement of the customers reduced. Number 3, and let you guess here actually. Number 3 is, what I started with, is we think that everything is predictive. So predictiveness is a wrong hypothesis in a world, as I call it, of business as unusual, with change and pressure from all sides. Predictiveness. We base all our assumptions from day one that we know everything. And even in that methodology, there is a hypothesis that as with time, you can enhance your estimates because you know more about what you're doing and about the facts, about the speeds, about the cost, about everything. So, because of that, this methodology has a very bad downside in the time we are living in right now. And that is, it does not embrace change. You put a plan and make changes to the plan periodically, but your assumptions from the very beginning are based on that you know a lot about what you are going to do, about your undertaking. So changing in this methodology, because it is some kind of a serial and everything is constructed according to the results of the previous phase, does not embrace, it's not like change very much. And by the way, we have to remember something about change in the era we are witnessing right now. Change is the rule. Why? Change comes from every possible direction. Let me give you some reasons for change. First reason for change throughout the span of the project, or the lifetime of the project. First of all, you have change because of the turbulence happening in legislations. And the business conditions. Maybe the market for your customer is changing and he is requiring something new. The taste of his customers, the condition on which he's going to do the sales that led to something in the functionality of the software had changed. All that is a change. So the business conditions all decline. This is quite understandable to happen. And thirdly, there is something which I call the implementation or the actual touching shock. What is that? Sometimes the customer is not conceiving exactly what he is going to get. And when you give him the whole functionality all together, you discover, and he discovers what happens exactly when you order a pizza from the internet, and you see a picture of the pizza, very nice topping, very nice insides and everything. You order it and they deliver it, and you get shocked. It's as big as that. The topping is very poor, and it's something different than you have seen in the picture. And sometimes people, this is a psychological effect, especially when the user is new to a project like that, or automation for the functions like that. He is expecting something, and after a long time, he gets another. So this is what I call the implementation shock. These are a couple of reasons that may call for a change. And because we assume predictiveness from the very beginning, we are not accepting change very much. These are the main downsides of this methodology, and that shows you that it's actually a folklore that is not in sync with what we call the zeitgeist, which is the current situation, the current pace of the business, and therefore we have to think twice about keeping it in place. Now the question is, where does waterfall still have its strengths? So waterfall is still having its strengths in cases where, one, predictiveness is prevailing. Let me give you an example where things are predictive. Let me say that we are building a tank, for instance, a military project in the defense industry. So we have years to do that. We know exactly what are the specifications. It's very rare that we change the specifications. It can happen, but it can happen very, very steadily, and we have a notice of that earlier enough. In that kind of projects, where predictiveness is prevailing, waterfall can be a good solution. Another thing, it's regarding the size of the team and the span of the project. When you talk about big projects, very large mandates with predictiveness, you are talking about possibility of using waterfall. So the project size again comes as a factor that would suggest waterfall in cases where you have bigger teams, you have more predictive specifications, and this is exactly where waterfall takes its strengths and still actually in use. Now, what to do? That is the real question. If we are not very successful with waterfall in medium to small size projects where predictiveness is not prevailing, and we are trying to predict what is unpredictable, so what to do? I think you know the answer. Let me just go through a very quick discussion to some suggestions on that. Well, it's not hard to predict. If I go back again to what I depicted in the last picture, everyone sensed that and started to put the solution here with the agile movement, with the advent of the agile movement. Agile, I would say agile, as I said, it's a matter of my culture. So, and of course you know about that, maybe you are already in that, but there are a few points that I would like to make about agile. Well, whatever the agile you are, the flavor actually you are adopting for your agile, whether that be that Scrum, the Lean, extreme programming, all that. Let me just stress a few factors. If you haven't gone agile so far, you must think of that. Whatever the size of change that you might think of and the contradictions that you may be fearing culturally, I mean, you must think of it. And it's time to make the jump. And the industry is full of assistance to do it. And so I advise you never to hesitate. One thing I would advise also is, and that actually one of the solutions that I revert to in my book about the relation between leadership and the agility, the movement of agility in software development. If you are still hesitating and you don't want to go agile, think of it like that. I have just coined the term agileoid. Agileoid, I meant something, well, linguistically this is not correct, I know, but just that I was inspired by spheroid, cuboid from mathematics and things like that. Something like agile. It's not exactly agile. And that equals adaptive development, or incremental, you don't even like adaptive, or at least incremental, plus good team leadership practices. That actually will give you, furnish the ground for you to have something that deals more with quality, morale, and that is what exactly said about the downsides that you may face if you are going totally waterfall. You don't have to go exactly by the book as stated in the agile methodology that you are adopting, but at least you think of doing things incrementally in chunks of functionality and value that you agree with your stakeholders. You think of ways to involve your stakeholders more in that, because their duration is short, they will not forget about you, maybe they get more involved. And you think of ways to get your team more cohesive by more leadership, by better leadership practices, and that will give you something very near to the actual agile methodology, which you can follow and you can learn and you can take to your organization or your teams. At that point I will stop, and there will be another video on habit number 2, and I would like to thank you very much for joining me in Techstamina. If you have any remarks, you can leave that on the comments in the Techstamina News Facebook group, or you can send me on the email that you see on that screen. Thank you very much for joining me in Techstamina.